Okay, so let's do some catch up. I mean, it's been 10 years in your last live presentation. I mean, you were live in back in 2015, and now you're coming back with your show. So, what was the spark that triggered this new tour, exploring new countries and new people? Why and why now?
Well, we pretty much were going to get back on it in 2015, but you know, Paul O'Neill passed away a
Hmm.
couple of years after that, and then one thing after another happened, and we play, and we do it every year with TSO. So we've been playing live. It's just that we had to get it back together as Savatage, like you said, and present that package and be the original band. So I don't know other than I think that John Oliva himself said, you know what? I think it's we got to get out there. It's now or never. If we're going to do it, we need to do it now.
You
And
gotta
that's
look.
the vibe I got from John. And what did you pick up, Chris?
Well, I mean, the COVID thing, it seems like it was yesterday. That was 5 years ago. Then it seemed like Vakken was yesterday to COVID. That 10 years
Oh yeah.
like that. So you could blink your eyes and another 10 years could go by, and it's like Zachy said, this is the time to do it. And John, had talked to a magazine about us doing a record. I think it kind of lit a spark around the world for people asking questions about whether or not we were going. And the offers came around, and our management called us up, and we were ecstatic, because I'd been waiting. Sabotage stopped playing in 2002, and I've been waiting since January 1st, 2003 to play again. So
Okay.
it's like, I've been waiting for this phone call since then. So for me, like especially as a fan of the band too, I didn't want to not be able to make that music and see that music and play that music. And I know that the fans feel the same way that I do about it. It was an important part of my life, and it's an important part of theirs. So I'm just happy that we're all getting together to fill that void and have some fun and play some music.
Okay, good. You mentioned Paul O'Neill's passing. Yes, I know the loss of him was like devastating for the band. You not only lost a producer, but also as he was a key figure for the band. Yes. So how did this passing influence the decision to reunite Sabotage? It has something to do with that, to maybe play him a tribute or in honor to him, to bring Sabotage back to all the countries.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's correct. Getting back together, one of the first things I was thinking of was we have to go, keep this music out live for people, to feel and to enjoy. And the crowd is the biggest thing that Paul used to key in on. He
Hmm.
would really study the audiences of Sabotage, and then he would tell us a lot like, hey, this is what I picked up from the people in South America. Here's what I picked up from your European audiences. And we would have discussions about how important the music was to them. And that's what makes it so special for us to go play, because we know our fans are the best in the world. They really have a big heart, and they're serious about it. They're serious music fans who know what they're talking about, who appreciate music, know music very well. It puts a little bit of pressure on us for that situation as well, because they're so well informed. But being out there to be able to honor Paul is a huge part of what we're doing, to keep his contributions, which were huge, keep those contributions alive. Him and John, really. I feel almost the same about Paul and John.
Hmm.
Um, Being able to go out and, make them very proud and carry on the legacy until John is with us all the time, but he's working his way back to the stage. But until he gets to the stage, or even as it is right now, where he's just there all the time, coaching and putting together set lists and just kind of like being our mentor, then we're gonna go out and do the
Yeah,
best we can to make them
he's
both
went
proud.
from mentally yours to mentory yours.
Yeah, the song "Mentoring Yours."
Well, I mean, it's like Paul was a visionary,
Hmm.
and people like him are very rare. And he always wanted the music to live past us, whether that was TSO, Savatage, whatever he did, because he was a fan of the arts as well as the music. So he loved the Beethoven and the Mozart and the way that went together in the theaters, and that's why he had come up with his concept of rock theater. And eventually Streets was supposed to be getting done, gutter ballet Streets for Broadway. And I went the last 4 days and I started playing every Savatage record, one to the last, and that's all I would play is that record. Pick up my guitar, play that record. And I went from Sirens to Dungeons to Paradise. And when Paul got involved with the band, it definitely changed the band in a lot of ways, and not necessarily in the music, but in the messaging and the lyrics and the way that the band, really was able to touch base with humanity. And a lot of that came through Paul's lyrics. And I just actually really was focusing on wanting to get through the Criss Oliva records, because I played guitar on the other ones, and I played an awful lot of the stuff that was on Handful, and I really wanted to kind of like dig my head deep into the life of Criss Oliva as a guitar player and those 10 years that went by when those records were being made. And like I said, I listened to Criss evolve as a guitar player in there, but you listen to the band also involved as writers, and the music came in. And when the production got together with Paul, and I finished last night with Edge of Thorns, and I went through that whole entire record a couple times, and there's just so many brilliant pieces of music, and there's so many brilliant statements and so many amazingly touching things that he manages to say in his lyrics that bring people together. And that's what he had always told me. He said anybody could write a song about a car and a girl, but it takes somebody really special that can write a song that could change somebody's life. And that's what Paula did. And, when people ask me, because there's this one moment in your life where they say your life is never the same again after it's got to be the moment that I met Paul. And I think that's the same for a lot of the people that work with him, with TSO, with Savatage, with everybody. And, he would have wanted the music to stay alive. He was constantly having us incorporate Savatage songs into the TSO shows and featuring Chris's, Rose guitar and trying to really, show the people that would have never had a chance to see that band, see what it was that band was about. And like I said, he was eventually going to have Streets done on Broadway. And to not keep that music alive, I think would be a disappointment to Paul. I mean, he would probably be upset with us if we didn't go out and make sure people had heard the stuff that we spent all those years creating. He would want us to be doing what we're doing, and John wants us to be doing what we're doing. We're more than happy to go out there and do these guys of justice on what they gave to our lives, because Criss Oliva gave me a spot in his band, and for me, I always feel like I owe the greatest amount of gratitude to not only him but to Paul, because it was Paul's idea to have me in that band. So for me to go out and play the music that they wrote and recorded, it just makes me feel like that's what I owe them, the least I owe them for what they've done for my life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And both of you mentioned many things that trigger many questions in my head. So let's focus in some of those. And you also mentioned John Oliva's absence, yes, in this tour, and that is something that in many ways must have affected the dynamics of the band, yes, but I don't get to see. Okay.
This shirt was a gift from John to me. John is on the shirt. It says "unfucking believable."
It's good.
So John is always there. I'm wearing the shirt that John.
Yeah, but how did his absence affect the dynamic of the band? And I wanted to know if you ever thought of using technology to maybe bring John on stage during your tour, maybe, I don't know, a live video or a recorded video, something on the screen. Have you thought about that?
Yes, that has been discussed. And you're talking about, what the dynamics are like. I'm in a situation where when I first came in the band, we didn't, John, he wasn't there, playing, so I've been in these iterations of the band where it's been with John and without John. And, I feel very comfortable with him there, because when we talked about this tour, I said, you're not sending me out there all by my lonesome, are you? So that's how comfortable I am having the mentor, right there with me on stage, and it'll be there again. You know what I mean? So, but as far as just what we do, as far as the show, it's pretty much doesn't really change the dynamic too much about how we perform. But it's always good to have. It's always better to have it there, But yeah, I think the performance dynamic, wouldn't you say, Chris, is about the same?
Yeah, we talked about figuring out ways we can make it happen. I mean, we're going to be rehearsing in the recording studio that Paul had bought. That was the original Morris sound, where Sirens and Dungeons and Edge of Thorns and the Dr. Butcher record were recorded at. So we have the capabilities of recording whatever we want, and we have our lighting technician and designer Brian Hartley with TSO is going to be doing the SAVATAGE shows. So if there's ever going to be a way to connect A and B, something will be figured out in the next month before we play. But we'll see what happens. I mean, that was the first thing that I had said when I saw him before we started rehearsing for TSO. I said, there's got to be a way that we could stick you on the screen. And my original thing was probably a little bit too tech problematic, because I was like, is there any way we can tie it in to live stream? But I mean, if you got delays and this and that, you'd never be able to coordinate the music. So if you got something recorded, maybe we could play along. We're figuring that all out. We have the greatest stage technicians for every type in the world working with TSO, and I'm sure if anything's going to be able to be done, we'll make it happen. So okay. I know Brian's doing the European tour and the South American dates, and we have more headline shows there, so they're definitely putting something together.
Criss, I had some personal question for you that I have in my mind for long ago. You were part of the band as a touring guitarist, and you were going to be part of the Gutter Ballet and Street Records, but you left the band to rejoin later. Why did you leave the band at that time? Why did you finally record those records?
Well, I was young and I was stupid, and the business was different then. It was like, I was 19 when I did my first show with SAVATAGE on the Dio tour. I was 20 years old when I joined the band for Gutter Ballet. I was 21 years old when we did the tour. And, at that point in time, I had a brother that I was in a band with as a child from age 13 till 17. And, he was getting very depressed when I was on the road, and I don't necessarily know if the word was cocky, but I think maybe I was getting confident about what I might be able to do, and you had to make a decision, and unfortunately back then you couldn't have two bands. You were a complete band whore if you had two bands. Yeah. It's not like now where somebody can play in 8 different bands at once and it's cool, and they try to adjust their schedules. So I wish I would have thought outside the box and stayed in SAVATAGE and tried this stuff with my brother on the side, but I didn't. And I was working with John just a little bit over a year later. I was actually almost back on the road with the band on the Streets tour. I was packed and ready to go, but there was some little bit of clashing between the band and the management as far as exactly what was going on at that point in time with me. And I think it was presented, but wasn't Paul, the manager, presented it a little bit late to them, early to me, late to them. Yeah. And so that it had been really something where I didn't leave the family very far, and it wasn't very long. I started working with John a year later. So I regret the time I missed with Criss. I regret the fact that Streets record is so iconic and it's so important to the history of the band, and I would have been standing there in that photo, and the only reason why I'm not is me. Okay. There's no other, and that kind of beats me up, because it's not necessarily like I wanted to be in that photo, but it's like that piece of the puzzle that I was a part of, and it was created for me. I wasn't, and then after Criss had passed, I think the transition to where things are now would have been a little bit less. You get a little barking here and there on
Hmm.
the fan sites about what's SAVATAGE and what's not SAVATAGE. Criss was teaching me. He was my mentor. I play these records now, and it is beyond freaky. And when
Okay.
I say I can't explain what's going on, I'm playing songs I've never played, and I know them. And
Okay.
it's crazy. I'll be playing these licks, and I think it's just what from what he taught me in my guitar playing that through advancing my skills, I'm able to pick up what he played without even thinking. It just comes out of my hands. And all of a sudden, this last week, my whole entire hand picking technique for fast changed.
Hmm.
And it blew one night
Okay.
in the way I was holding a pick when I was moving fast.
Hmm.
And I was like, what the hell just happened to my hand? And all of a sudden, these fast runs are coming out like I was never able to do them before. So there's just a lot, I think, of me that exists as a guitar player and a person and a performer because of Criss. So, like I said, that I wish I could turn back the clock. You can't,
No, you can.
the least I could do is what I'm doing, is just try to
Yeah.
pay the best tribute to him. And you know, people know exactly how much this means to me. It's not a
Yeah.
secret. So,
Okay. Thank you. Now that you mention Streets, I mean, Streets is still one of the most acclaimed albums from the band, yes. And how do you think that album in particular influenced Sabotage sound and identity throughout the years? Yes. And apart from that, how do you feel about the fact that Streets was like a key piece in metal that triggered projects such as maybe Avantasia or Aerion or some of those mega metal operas that are nowadays going around?
well, if you look at the Gutter Ballet and the When the Crowds Are Gone videos, you see what was bubbling in Paul's brain as far
Yes.
as the band was in a theater. There was the orchestra with the rock band. If you listen to even, Prelude to Madness before Mountain King, he had the strings battling the guitars. He
Hmm.
wanted to combine classical and rock, and he wanted to combine theater and rock. And the Streets record was his baby. That was the first time he had the opportunity to have a story on a record, a complete story, and that became a big part of what Sabotage did. Obviously, it's the staple of how the TSO records are done. So from there, I think. I mean, listen to Edge of Thorns. There's piano pieces on that
Yes.
record,
Yes.
and John was there was no piano player in the band at that time, but that influence of that when Paul was able to get a hold of the Olivas and realize just how freaking good those two were as writers and musicians, he just had this giant arsenal of things that he knew he could do creatively and musically with the Oliva brothers behind his brain and his lyrics and writing with them. And you just listen to it. Like I said, I went through all those records one after another. And it's an amazing progression, especially like I said, when you listen to the way Criss developed and the way his lead style went and just turned into this fireball at one point. And then, like I said, you listen to how the piano went in and how the vocals changed. And then, eventually we started landing in the harmonies. And then with Chance, the counterpoint happened and this and that. It was a progression that was so cool. And Paul had such a huge part to do with that, but the fact that the elements were there, and a lot of that element was in the John Lennon side of John Oliva.
Hmm. All right.
He has this ability to be like a Cyrano type with that piano and write these songs that'll make you cry your eyes out musically. And Paul would do the same thing. So when Paul and John wrote those ballads together, those were powerful.
Yeah.
That pair was insanely powerful as a ballad writer. In the same, I feel in the same way, like somebody who was writing "Let It Be."
Yeah.
Streets is to me, that's one of my favorite Savatage albums, and that's coming from me being a fan first of the band, big fan before I got the chance to be in the band. But Streets hit me as like metal meets The Who meets Meatloaf with even more metal. And like Criss said, the ballads and the stuff that came out on that record, amazing. And in my life, not only kind of getting the record and, you know, digesting it and everything like that, just as a fan before I was in the band, because that was like 1990, but also that being my first assignment by Paul O'Neill. He told me, learn the entire Streets album and meet me in my apartment in about a week.
Okay.
If you want to audition for the band. So to me, I mean, having to learn that entire thing, that's crazy. I learned it. He said, that's good.
Zach can imitate John's talking parts on that record. He has that voice.
Got a quarter.
Hey man, you got a quarter?
Exactly. All right, and you also mentioned, you know, I discovered the band with the Handful of Rain record when I was like 15 years old or so, and I was shocked by the song Chance. Yes, it was the first time I ever heard something like that, and it was the first song to contain the counterpoint that you mentioned, Criss. So how did this idea came about? It was your idea, Zach? How difficult it is to...
That was Paul.
Okay.
Paul wanted to do Broadway. Let him go on and tell you.
Oh, as far as Chance, I mean, Paul, he came in talking about, you know, wanting to do something where you had a canon, you know, which is another name for counterpoint.
Yes.
You know, canons and different things like that. So John, you know, came up with the riff. And then they were able to work, you know, John and Paul worked together and got all the pieces of that song together, which is amazing. And then, you know, Paul was saying, hey, let's try to put a part where we can have the canon, you know, so it wound up being the kind of the drum that dun 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 that sets it up. And then Paul was able to go about building the different melodies and the you know, the counterpart. And then he would simply tell me, you know, here's kind of basically what we do. And this kind of went for all of them that we did from that time on.
Yes.
Was you start with a melody that's kind of flowing and simple.
Father, can you hear me? This is not how it was meant to be. I am safe and so are you, as for the other's destiny. Father, can you hear me? This is not how it was meant to be. I am safe and so are you, as for the other's destiny.
And then you quickly follow that with something a little more complicated, which has a you know, a little bit more rhythmic, you know, pattern to it, a little faster rhythmic pattern.
Father, can you hear me? This is not how it was meant to be. I am safe and so are you, as for the other's destiny.
And then you kind of come in with one that, then the third melody will be one that tempers both of them. It's sort of in the middle of the two.
Father, can you hear me? This is not how it was meant to be. I am safe and so are you, as for the other's destiny.
And then the fourth one will be something that's more flowing over the top. If you do go that far, so most of the time we had 4 parts, sometimes even 5. And then he just would basically say, hey, here's what I have in mind for part 1. And he goes, take it. And then I would sing it. And he goes, okay, that. And then we got the second time around, usually has a harmony. And he just left that up to me because I'm kind of, you know, kind of a harmony, you know, type, you know, person. I come up with the parts that seem to work. So, and then we'd go on to the next part, put a harmony, and so on, and kind of build it like that. Then at the end, there'll be what we call the explosion. If you notice, there's an explosion at the end of a lot of these, you know, where everything culminates, and it's like this climax.
All the time believing that it now came down to nothing but this time.
Of a big vocal to get out of the section and then back into the main riff of the song in most cases. But, you know, that's basically
I think he froze.
Yes,
You
he
know,
proved.
and
Back,
once you get
back
used to the,
suspended.
He's
You
back.
suspended in animation. We lost you for like 3 seconds. You froze.
No,
Like,
but
and if you watch Broadway, what Broadway would do that was different, but the same was, towards the end of the show, they would take 5 different songs, and the character would come out singing their part from that song on top of the other song as it was going on. So Paul just took that whole concept, and for the first time, I think ever, did it as one song and entirely different parts you'd never heard that were just for that song.
Yeah,
But it's
but
the same. That's the same concept of that. If you watch Broadway shows, they'll bring each actor comes out singing their part over another part, and what that was. And it just became a staple part of everything that Paul had been doing. We started doing it with the songs on Dead Winter Dead, and we kept it going with the TSO music, and
exactly. And how difficult is to bring this to live shows?
difficult. No. Well, if you look at the number of tracks, we're using a lot of tracks, like in the recording process. So you have to be smart when you're preparing it for live. And I've had a lot of experience with it. And that's what we're working on right now. Everybody has a part and that they're comfortable with. And then we work from there. I just say, hey, who wants to sing? Who likes this part? Because you do have to have many, many people stacking up, and they got to be, but everybody's doing a great job. I mean, vocally, I'll tell you right now, vocally, the band is as strong as it's ever been. We have more
using
singers.
2 keyboard players, and
we got 2 keyboard players we added to, while John is out. So they actually are really great singers themselves. So now we are in a much different situation, a much more improved situation vocally than we've ever been, which is great. I love the additional vocal punch that the band is having. Everybody's doing a great job. But when you talk about difficult, yes, it's difficult. But however, that's, when we practice, then everybody gets used to your part. Once you have a part in that, that's the part you live with forever. We don't go changing people and making things complicated. We find out who likes what, and they're going to be right for that, and that's the part. And you can go to sleep at night and dream about that part. Never let it go. You'll be dreaming about that the rest of your life. It'll be a curse as well as a blessing, and that's just the way it goes in the vocal land.
Okay.
I'm enjoying the fact that I'm getting to do this now, because when I did all those other Savatage tours, I'd only sang background vocals. I mean, I have 9 records of singing lead, and lots of vocal lessons coming out this time. So I'm gonna be I'm a way better backup singer now than I was then. So it's
Criss
fun.
is one of the main reasons that this vocal situation in Savatage has greatly improved. Just himself over the last 10 years. I mean, wow. I mean, so he's carrying a lot of load. Criss is carrying a heavy load vocally these days on those parts as well as other stuff. Yeah,
and it's good for me because if anybody is feeling a little light on different notes, I can sing the different notes and timbers. So I'm pretty good at finding the parts too. I did a lot of that kind of layering stuff. The thing that really enabled us to have that stuff come alive as well as it did in the studio too is that our studio engineer that we've been using for almost 30 years now, actually it is 30 years now, with Savatage and TSO, is a guy named Dave Whitman. And Dave he engineered Foreigner 4, he's
Kiss Alive,
so good. And when he gets in the studio and Paul has these parts, he knows how to layer and put them up and make these things happen to them. So as that whole concept of the counterpoint went into the records as we went on, Paul would leave be doing business. He'd be sitting in another room listening, and he'd have Dave up to pan these things and to get them going. Because there's an art. There's a real art actually to the way, like Zachy was saying with the vocals, you have to have the sitting different rhythmically so they'll stick out. And then you have to have them be different notes and different layers. And there was just a complete art to the way the one part would come in and where it would sit on the side, and the next part would come in and where it would sit. And Paul working with Dave, you know, as our records went on with him, it was so great, which is why we were always so blessed with TSO Live. Dave's not going to be doing the Savatage shows, but people would go, you guys, TSO is tapes, they're not live. And it's like, the reason why we sounded like the record is because we had the guy who mixed the record doing the live
Mixing
sound.
us live.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like with Paul and him in the studio together, mixing and producing and putting these records out with those two ears going on, you know, guys that had lived in those giant studios and knew how to bring that sound to life in the little stereo speakers. We had advantages with Paul and Dave together. And like I said, the same way we did with Criss and Paul and John and Paul. There was just the people that were creating these records were legendary.
Yeah. All right.
I wonder if Zach realized that he had to go out and get to his old link.
He's coming back?
I'd hope so. Well, because in order for me to get back to you, I just had to go click off and then go
Yes,
back
and go back. Yes.
on the link again.
All right.
He'll figure it out. Zach is smart. He'll figure it. He'll be back.
All right.
Zach is back. I'll
All
start
right.
singing. If he shows up, I'll start singing AC/DC.
You know, you're playing in the context of a festival, yes, which for Savatage can be kind of challenging because you will have like a short time to play. So how do you plan to tackle this challenge to ensure that the fans will be able to hear all what Savatage has to offer?
Well, I mean, there's songs that
Hi, Zach.
Hey,
Zach is back. I told him I was going to sing AC/DC.
I'm sitting there
When you showed
texting
up.
Chris because I didn't even really know how to get back on, but I just
Oh, okay. I
the
wasn't
link.
looking at my text
just
because
went
I
back
got
to the
right
link.
back on.
We knew where
He
you
was
were
asking.
smart enough.
What he just asked me is how we're going to go about tackling the fact that we don't have that. You know, with the festival sets a little bit shorter, and I mean, you know, there's the songs that. Luckily for Savatage, our title tracks wound up being identifiable for those albums as sometimes the most important song on the record, like Edge of Thorns and you know, Mountain King, obviously. So when you look at things like that, you get an easier way to pick a shorter set. You know, with something like Handful of Rain. Obviously, you mentioned the fact that Chance would be something that we would probably always want to have in a live show. There's certain songs that go that way. As far as, you know, me with anything I have to do, this time I really want to make sure that because it is a short set and you don't get a long time to really warm up as you're playing, I'm going to probably escape for a couple hours before I do the first shows and really get my hands to the point where it feels like I've already played a show. Because I want to go up there. It's the first time I've done this stuff live, you know, really, the way I'm looking at it in 23 years. We played that one festival, but this is to be like, you know, it's really important for me to be there. So I'm gonna really do what I don't usually do, which is warm up. And I got that was funny. I stole that from Criss Oliva because people asked Criss once if he warmed up, and he says, "Yeah, I do in the first 3 songs."
Yeah,
And
he
I
never
thought that was like the most badass thing I ever heard. Like, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll warm up by the third time the third song is done." And it's the same thing that Ronnie Dio would say. Ronnie Dio would be like, "You know, I'm not going to lose what I have warming up. I'm saving it for the crowd." So that was, you know, why Ronnie always says he never warmed up. But Criss would always say, like, you know, I do it at first, but I do not want to take time to have 3 songs that aren't sounding like I'm warmed up. So yeah, I think we'll be able to assemble it. I mean, you're gonna know as you play if you miss something, you know, if you get out of these shows and people are like, "Oh my god, this need," you know, so you can make an adjustment. I learned that from working with Doro for 20 years. You know, she had so many records and she would change her set list around every hour, you know, every day. It'd be like, what do we need to do? Because if somebody wrote one person, there'd be a crowd of 50,000 people, and one person could miss a song, the next day she'd be like bothered, like somebody just burned her house down. I'm like, Dora, what's the matter? She's like, I don't know, Chris. We might have to do Metal Tango today. I don't. It was just one letter from one fan, you know. Yeah, I've watched the way set lists change and adjust, so I'm used to that world.
Mhm.
And like I said, I've been playing every single record, so I don't care what. Right now, it's like people can pick any song.
Yes, you know, many were hoping that Sabotage will announce like a sideshow for the festival. Yes, but is it possible that this act of yours in the festival will trigger a new visit soon to these countries again? Are you just somehow testing the audience?
I think it'll trigger something that
Yeah,
we
we're already talking about next
play
year.
places with the intention of coming back. I mean, that's what we've always done. I mean, business wise, we play places with the intention of starting, going there, continuing to go there and build up the market and build up the crowd. You don't get anywhere by not playing. So we've always said we got to go play, and the goal is to play in front of more and more people as you go along. In my opinion, I think we're definitely playing there, playing for you guys to come back.
Yeah, we've been talking already about next year having a larger amount of dates in South America, and that would give us a chance to go to places we hadn't played on this one too, and to get the Sabotage shows in places like Argentina and Chile, and we were talking about Colombia and Mexico and some other places that we hadn't been to yet. So I'm just interested to see what happens next. I'm living this thing right now day to day, because 1 year ago, if you were to be asking me what's going on with Sabotage, I'd be like, I don't know.
No, exactly.
I'm waiting like all of you. It's my same answer that I gave for 23 years, and now there's shows, and I'm the happiest person alive about it. So it's just a matter of we'll take it one day at a time. I don't book the shows. I don't want to book the shows. So when they get them together, I'll play the shows, and that's it. And hopefully it'll be everywhere that everybody wants to see us, and that's it. So.
All right. And beside the shows, I mean, I read in some interview that John mentioned that you have enough material to record like 4 albums now. So and you started recording some album in 2022, 2023, and it stopped due to John's health. What are the plans for you for the next years? Are you planning to finish that album, come up with something new?
I think so. I'm sitting here with a folder that has like 20 songs in it, but John continues to write. His health is not having any impact on his writing. He's always been writing, and what's going on right now is he's writing stuff that's actually beating some of the older stuff now. So the older stuff's getting replaced with the newer ideas. So that's what we're seeing right now. So
He goes in the studio every day.
Tons of music.
Because like I said, we own the studio, so he goes in every day and they turn the Pro Tools on and he starts playing. And if it's something really good, they'll loop it and fix it, and the next day, if he wants to extend that, John's been doing that, ever since I first met John. That's all he did. When he was waiting to work with Paul, he would be writing, and he would write every day. I mean, that's what John Oliva does. He's got so many songs. There's probably 1,000. You know how Prince had them all organized in his library in his house and this and that with all these songs. Somewhere sloppy and unmarked cassette tapes all over the world is probably John's stuff, because John was never, he was never tech savvy. He was never really organized. So it's like I found a thing of old cassettes in a box in my basement here that has I have the Streets writing cassettes in my closet, that I don't think he even realized he left in this box when he was staying with me when we were writing Dr. Butcher, and I have all these tapes, and I'm like, Jesus, I got to make sure I get these to somebody that could get the music before they get ruined on the cassettes. And I mean, there's so many things on there, and I have, spent tons of time with him in these kind of circumstances where we were it wasn't necessarily lazy. We were just so busy, and if you had a cassette tape and you needed a space to record something, you'd flip the back of something. You say you're mixing freaking Dead Winter Dead, and you had a pile of 10 cassette tapes that had, you know, Starlight mix 1, and then the whole rest of the tape, 90-minute tape, was empty. You know, John would grab that cassette and start recording songs onto it, but sometimes it never got marked on the cassette tape. Or there might be like something on a black Sharpie on a black cassette that you can't even read that says, doesn't it say wake up? What does that say? You don't even know, so you got to sit there and listen through the whole tape. Sometimes I'll listen to the tape and I hear Sports Center and John snoring for a half an hour, and I'm like, he fell asleep with the recorder on. So it's like that's what these cassettes are like, but I've got piles of them that I want to get through and find things, because I think there's a lot of gems in that stuff.
Someday we can be able to listen to all of that in some like limited edition box from Savatage or something like that. Yeah. But you know, you mentioning cassettes, and that brings me to one of the last questions is, most of young kids today, they don't know what a cassette even is. I mean, they didn't use it. And I was wondering, how do you feel like, what would be Savatage's legacy in relation to the new generation of fans? Because, I mean, in order to really understand Savatage music, you need to pay attention. You need to sit down, put your headphones and listen to the music. It's not something that you put there while you're cooking, yes? Which is that what kids do nowadays. They just listen to singles and not full albums. So how do you feel about this and Savatage music?
It's going to be the fans or the people who are interested. It's going to be on them to do the listening, like you mentioned. That's the way this band is. You're not going to be able to just get 10 seconds. And I know that attention spans of the young generation are very short. Yeah. We've created that. When you got a phone in your hand, you're born with a phone in your hand. Babies are now born with small iPhones that grow along with you. Everything is immediate gratification. If you don't get immediately gratified or happy by something, you are pushing the button and going on to the next reel. Yeah. So that's just the way it is. But it's going to have to be up to the person who's listening to make that decision to go, you know, look at the history and do. And you know what the great thing is? There's a million of them out there that still want to do that. So that's going to be great for us. We can't make people have a longer attention span. I have 2 kids. They're older now, but when they were kids, I couldn't program their attention span to be longer. You know, that comes with age and stuff like that. But the good thing is we got some younger people who realize, hey, wait a minute, I got to have a little bit longer attention span to get things in life. So I think more and more kids are learning that, and I think they'll take the time to listen. And I think it's going to be very good for us.
I wish the vinyl industry would be, I'm so happy that it's back. I wish it would be selling millions so that the cost wasn't as much for these kids to buy the vinyl, because I think the vinyl makes it more like a history book for them, more like, you know, the way recordings were for us. So I'm really happy that we got to do the whole entire Savatage catalog, including the live records, as vinyl, because all those, as far as I'm concerned now, are not just on digital, something that's going to disappear if you lose your electric. You know, it's like you have these records that are basically placed in a library, you know, and people have their little collection of vinyl. It's a library. That's why, you know, I even wanted to release a vinyl record of some of my stuff this year, because none of it had been on vinyl. And I'm like, wow, I never had a cassette. I only had CDs of my solo records. So I'm kind of like, man, I want to have that part go out there. I want to have a vinyl record. And, you know, that's what we grew up in. Granted, we did have the cassettes too, but those, like I said, those cassettes got damaged, you know, and now that the kids have the records and they're looking at them, I think you're able to sit the same way we did when we were kids. You put that record on and you kind of live with that album. And with the stories being there and the pictures and everything, I think that the real music fans have a a better way to grab a hold. Like I said, I just wish it was cheaper for them to cheaper for us to make and cheaper for them to buy.
Yes.
You know, because it's so expensive to make those and so expensive for them to buy them. They're not that expensive because we're trying to make money off them. They're that expensive because of how much it costs to make them.
Yes.
That costs a lot to make those records.
Another thing that shows that things are coming around again, I always used to tell people, you know, in SAVATAGE and the history and the time that the band came around, just in my time, I recorded half the records on 2-inch tape. Half the records were done on 2-inch tape using cassettes as references and things like that to go play in the car. Paul and Neil will say, here's a cassette, go play it in the car and see how the mix is. We use the car as a playback mechanism as well as other monitors and things like that. And, you know, and the other half is digital. The other half of my career was, you know, is all the new, you know, the digital recording stuff, all the programs, Pro Tools and everything else. But now you're seeing a lot of bands going back to wanting to record the 2-inch because they realize that there's more frequency range with a 2-inch and things sound better and the bass has more punch. So you know what? Things are coming around, and those kind of things give me, you know, hope that attention spans of kids will increase. Now that people are going back to the old recording techniques, they'll record all the tracks on 2-inch and they might mix digitally. But still, I like the fact that people are discovering that some of the old ways are actually even better.
Yeah, of course. So this will lead me to the last question. If you were, both of you, if you were recruited to a new young band that wants to be like SAVATAGE, what would be the first advice you would ever give them? Now.
Get out of the business.
Run.
I'm just kidding.
Be yourself. You know, be yourself. Stay honest to yourself. Find an identity. By the time you copy someone, it's not the thing to do. So become the thing to do. And stay true to yourself. And if this is what you want to do for a living, try to be as good as humanly possible at what it is you're doing. Because there's going to be another million kids that want to do exactly what you're doing. And in order to rise above, I mean, granted, I don't know out there who is the next Prince, who's the next John Oliva, who's the next Paul McCartney. I don't know where that kid is. He could be watching this interview right now, and if you are there, don't stop. You know, if you're presenting that kind of music and that's what's inside you, don't punish the world by running away from it. Don't listen to somebody tell you that's not what you should do, because you know that's if that's what lives inside of you. I picked this to be what I wanted to do. I didn't have a backup plan, which is kind of foolish, but you know, I saw that. And I stayed kind of tunnel vision on it. And luckily I had a lot of being in the right place in the right time, the right things. But I also busted my butt, you know, to make sure that I was going to be good enough to be where I was. That's why I was, you know, in my first time band when I was 17 years old. So I was playing with SAVATAGE when I was 19 years old. It wasn't just the luck and timing. It's I laser focused myself on being who I am. And that's what you do. Just... And don't take the critics seriously because they all have a different opinion.
Yeah, don't listen. I think Chris's points are perfect. I agree with everyone. Work hard. Be true to your art, which is something that I heard from Paul O'Neill, by the way. You better be true to your art, because if you go chasing something else, it's not going to work out. You got to go, what do I want? And that's going to create an original sound for you. And then you stick with that, and everybody work hard and get better at your particular instrument or craft, and that'll work out. You're trying to chase something, like Chris said, if you're, you know, it's never going to work out. I've known few people who changed completely when the trends came, but they also were doing other things like producing and became producers. So that makes sense. But when you're a band that's just jumping to the next fad and jumping to the next trend, that usually doesn't work out. So I like Chris's point. Stick to your
nowadays. Nowadays, it's really important too. It's always important, but don't be the asshole. You know, think before you speak, and everything you say now is going to be recorded, and so be prepared to know that, you know, you can change your life for the good and for the bad by saying or doing the wrong things. So just try to be the good person. Try to be the person that people want in their band, not the person that they don't want in their band. Try to be the musicians that the business people want to work with, not the ones that they warn other people not to work with. I mean, and that's that. A lot of that goes with don't believe your own hype unless you actually have it. You know, don't think you're freaking headlining stadiums unless you're headlining stadiums. You know, get yourself to that point, and then, you know, you don't even need to be that person. I don't even understand what the concept of rock star means. I don't consider myself any different than any people in the audience. Some people do, but, you know, heaven forbid that is part of you and your personality. Save it until you're actually strong enough and powerful enough to use it, because it can ruin your whole entire life by being that. Because people, they don't want to work with the person that's not nice to work with, and they're not going to help you. And it's a big thing. I mean, it's really important just to think before you speak.
Yeah, completely agree, guys. Well, thank you very much for your time. I want to see you here live. I hope times run fast, even though, as you mentioned and you say in your lyrics, this is a time and this is a place, and you will be here, yes, and we will have the joy of seeing SAVATAGE live soon.
Yes,
thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to see you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much, man. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Frozen. we freeze like we're in Boston Pap.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.